Britain has some of the finest gardens anywhere in the world. For me, it's about getting in amongst the wonderful plants that flourish in this country and sharing the passion of the people who tend them. However, there is another way to enjoy a garden. And that's to get up above it. I love ballooning because you get to see the world below in a whole new light. From up here you get a real sense of how the garden sits in the landscape, how the terrain and the climate has shaped it. And I want you to share that experience with me. I'm taken to the skies over a county on the southeastern edge of the country, and what a surprise it is. I'll show you a wonderful open rural landscape bisected by waterways and bounded by 350 miles of coastline, with the Thames providing a direct link into the heart of London. Today I'm visiting Essex. In the north of the county you've got the beautiful Epping Forest, in the far south the Thames Estuary, and on the east mile upon mile of marshland and mudflats. What a view! I want to show you how different this county is from the suburban outpost of London we sometimes imagine. It's the maritime geography of Essex that creates a temperate climate. It's one of the driest counties in the country, and that makes for some fascinating gardens. Today I'll be seeing how two beautiful gardens are flourishing here despite the low rainfall. The first belongs to a woman who's inspired a whole generation to get more creative in the garden. See, I like that, And I find out from one garden curator, who was once a student of mine, how his career has flourished.
I remember as we were sort of dozing off, he used to sort of shout and get us all awake again. So those moments still haunt me.
Pleasantly. While we see how keeping the simple traditions alive in Essex not only gives us a link to the past, but also ensures our future.
How is it?
Lovely!
Inland, most of Essex is made up of small traditional villages and glorious farmland as far as the eye can see. And 5 miles to the east of Colchester lies a green haven that is a special place in my heart, the Beth Chatto Gardens. This garden, started in 1960, is world famous for its pioneering, naturalistic approach to planting, which changed the way people looked at their gardens forever. This garden for me oozes plantsmanship, a lake, woodlands and a dry garden the like of which you won't see anywhere else. It's exciting, it's invigorating, and I can't wait to get down there. This glorious place is a testament to the vision of Beth Chatto and her former husband Andrew, who were determined to make a garden grow out of an arid wilderness. Today, you just have to marvel at the way Beth makes plants flourish. It's her simple philosophy to grow plants in exactly the same conditions as they would have done in the wild. And in doing that, she's turned what was once a wasteland into a wonderful garden. Beth Chatto's right plant, right place, but we seldom see it. But here in her garden, it exudes from every single bed, and is a testament to Beth's genius. She's probably most famous for creating this gravel garden, which proves her theory beautifully. It's full to bursting with all manner of fantastic plants, despite the fact it's never been artificially watered. In contrast, there's a water garden, where clusters of irises and other plants make beautiful swathes of colour and texture around 4 ponds. It's like finding an oasis in a parched landscape. And in the glorious gloom of the woodland garden, you'll discover shade-loving plants at their very best. Beth Chatto has had no formal horticultural training, but has a creative eye for what works, and she isn't afraid to experiment, and that's what I love about it here. But back in 1960, it was hardly an auspicious start. Beth moved into a new house with her husband Andrew, a farmer. But the house was surrounded by the worst possible growing conditions: dry, gravelly soil and a boggy ditch. Most self-respecting gardeners would have run a mile. But the couple began planning a garden that would make a feature of each difficult area. In 1981, a fresh-faced young reporter visited Beth to hear about the problems they faced. You might recognise him.
If you think that you've got a problem garden, can you imagine trying to make a garden out of this? It's a piece of wilderness that's got in it every kind of perennial weed you can think of. Not only did she have an enormous weed problem, but she also had a pretty rotten soil. Just look at this.
Beth and Andrew worked with the problem areas in their garden rather than trying to fix them. Andrew researched the wild background of plants, collected specimens from all over the world, and Beth created artistic displays of unusual species plants rather than the colourful cultivars popular in the 1970s and 80s.
For me, it is the shape of a plant which is the most important, the texture, the foliage. And so I like to build up contrasting shapes. Fine leaves, small leaves, contrasted with the big leaves of hostas, and then occasionally the tall spikes of anything, whether it's a sword-like leaf or a fine grass or a foxglove or delphinium, whatever.
By the time Alan visited, Beth had already become a successful gardening author and TV personality. Crowds were flocking to visit her garden, and she was winning gold medals every year at the Chelsea Flower Show. But these days, at the age of 91, Beth isn't as hands-on as she used to be, leaving some pretty big shoes for garden director David Ward to fill. Hi David, how are you?
Hello there.
What are you doing?
I'm collecting Phlomis grasseliana seed.
Also known as Turkish sage, this has striking yellow flowers in the summer. Ah, lovely. It's a lovely plant, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I just love how it goes up in rows and rows and rows.
Yeah, it's such a useful plant.
I mean...
And it's fantastic sound, isn't it? They just rattle. So they're ripe, ready to collect. Yeah.
Can I help?
Yeah, you certainly can. If you'd like to grab a bag.
Great.
There you go. You can write the name on the bag first.
Yeah.
Not very technical.
Date?
Yeah, date would be great. Yeah.
In a garden like this, there's always something to be done. And seeds are gathered and stored for selling or for resowing next season.
If you spin them round,
Hey.
they just pop out.
Yeah. It's good fun, isn't it, the old twist and shake?
That's right, yeah.
How did you come to be here, David?
Well, I've been working here for over 30 years. I actually turned Beth down. I made her wait a year before I came. And then I realised I probably made a bit of a mistake, came back, and she very kindly said, yes, you can still come along. And when I first came here, she was totally involved in everything. I mean, she had her own ways of doing things. She horrified me when I first arrived because her sort of way she'd done cuttings, her equipment was a razor blade and a pack of plasters. So I did refuse to go down that route, and so I prefer to use my knife.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful garden. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of effort has gone into it. Even before I came here, I appreciate that Beth built up a lovely garden, and all of us here are quite proud to carry it on.
David's been around as the garden's evolved over the years, playing his part in Beth's more radical schemes. The gravel garden was created in 1992 on what was once a car park and was an experiment to see which drought-resistant sun lovers would survive without any form of irrigation. During a hot spell in the first 2 years, when the plants were failing and Beth was desperate to water, David persuaded her not to. It could have all gone horribly wrong, but luckily the weather broke and the rest, as they say, is history.
Hey, look what I've got in here.
What you got there?
You've got a right plethora in here.
Will do.
Look.
What happens is you have to leave the bag open and they'll all crawl up.
Yeah. Well, we've got shield bugs.
Right.
We've got ladybirds. We've got earwigs. Yeah. Hey. Well, let's go and sort these out and get all these bugs out. And shall we have a cup of tea?
That sounds a great idea.
Come on.
Beth's planting philosophy was heavily influenced by a Japanese theory about the 3 layers of heaven, earth and man. And I think this is beautifully illustrated here. It draws your eyes up or down with something to see at every level.
And this garden's just full of examples of Beth's triangulation, isn't it?
It is actually, yeah. I mean, we're just walking past a really good example. You can see a lovely line. It's all about shape, line and form. So from the Scotinus through the Amelanchier, the monkey puzzle, up to the conifer, you've got a lovely linear line through there.
And the same thing coming down,
Yeah,
you know,
coming
this
down
way.
there,
And if you move here, you've got the same flipping principle.
That's right, whatever way you view it from.
But so many people in the garden, I mean, they just plonk plants, don't they, without even thinking, really.
It is. It's not just sort of tall, medium and short.
No.
There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, you can also do it, you know, with plants in pots, can't you? Because so many people buy and they don't play. I've seen people go to a garden centre and they'll, you know, it's like sort of putting in regimental sergeant majors. They'll put them in a line. And you sort of think, actually, nice plants, but you could do so much more with them.
Right.
And it is just that triangulation, isn't it? Sort of contrasting the leaf shapes and the size. You know, it's not, you know, it's not rocket science.
I don't want to sound bossy, but think of all the fun you can have.
I love doing this, you know. I love going to garden centres and just nicking things off benches and playing to create the magic.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that. I like that.
Well, another way of doing it, what Beth will do is, as I say, put the grass down here, so the
Right.
line's going like this.
Yeah.
And sort of fill that void in around there.
That's what's missing in so many beds, isn't it? You don't get the sense of adventure, of being able to, you know, what is just round there.
That's right.
Well, let's go and get some more plants and then we can play a bit more.
That's a good idea.
For gardens like this, with plenty of sun and a tendency to dry soil, sedums are very nearly the perfect plant. As well as being drought resistant and needing very little care, this plant will provide gorgeous, colourful flowers in summer and even looks good in the winter. The smaller species will give good ground cover, and the taller ones are great for cutting and drying. And if you need any more persuading, they're great for attracting butterflies and bees too. Somehow Bath managed to combine the creation and running of this wonderful place with a busy family life. Her 2 daughters and 6 grandchildren, and now their children, have all grown up with the garden. Julia Bolton is Beth's eldest granddaughter and commercial director at the garden. Now, you grew up in this very special place. Now, what childhood memories have you got?
You know, a lot of my memories involve parts of the garden that no longer exist. So, for instance, the gravel garden before was the car park. So,
Right.
yeah, so we would play on there, you know, football and take our bikes. But really, my very favourite place is here in the water garden where we are right now.
Throughout their childhood, Julia and her brother spent their school holidays here. At a time when Beth was at the height of her career doing Chelsea and writing books. But for the youngsters, the whole garden stretched out before them like a giant playground. Now, Julia's children have the run of the place.
What I do remember doing was making some little boats with my brother. And we
Okay.
used to race them under the bridge here, and I wondered if you'd like a challenge, Christine.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
great.
we can play. Yeah.
Jolly good, but I have
Yeah.
to warn you,
Yeah.
I did actually push my brother in once when he was leaning to get his boat, so I don't want any funny business.
Okay, well, if you promise not to push me in, I promise not to push you in.
Okay, it's a deal.
Right, come on, let's play. Get down there, come on.
On a count of 3, do you want to count down?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Oh, Lord! Come on, get out there! Get out there! Oh, Mum wants to stay near me. Well, look at that. It's going to catch it up. No, it's not. No, it is. Come on after it.
No, look.
I can see she's done this before.
I think I'm just going to have to admit
Defeat, yeah.
Well,
You're a good sport.
Jack. Well, it's all very well doing this, but now we've got to get up.
That's right, come in.
Good hand. Oh, that's fun.
This garden is filled with happy memories for Julia, and she's enormously proud of everything her grandmother has achieved. But I'm sure she and Beth have more plans up their sleeves.
What of the future? What are you going to do with this garden?
Well, we get asked that quite a lot because obviously Beth's getting older now.
Yeah.
But gardens change all the time, and obviously there's going to be carrying on replanting certain areas and that kind of thing, but it's all in the style of Beth Chatto. But one of the things that we are really excited about here is that we're setting up an educational charity in Beth Chatto's name.
Great.
So it's something that we're really, really proud about. So
And you see, that's exactly how Beth has spent her life. Taking little seedlings, growing them on, and then seeing them bloom. That's really, really lovely. Very special.
Spot on,
It
yeah.
is spot on.
Yeah.
Come on, but it's not spot on that I didn't win that race. So on to another race. Let's go and get some more boats.
come on.
From the smooth waters of Beth's Garden Pond, it's just a few miles to the River Colne. Once an important trade route, and much more of a challenge for the boats that had to navigate its tricky waters. From above, you get a spectacular view of the Essex coastline and a real sense of how it shaped the county's history. In the 19th century, these tributaries and estuaries that wend their way eastward and out to the North Sea would have been crowded with the distinctive red-brown sails of the Thames barges. They carried cargoes of brick, grain and coal along the Thames estuary and out to the coast. Kitty dates back to 1895 and is one of the few restored working barges left. Kevin Burtonshaw feels proud to be a current skipper.
What makes the Thames barge special is it's got a flat bottom, so these were able to go up all the little inlets, serve all the little villages, take their coal, goods from London, whatever it might be, right up into the little places. And a lot of the work of these was what we call stack barges. They'd literally carry a haystack loaded up on their deck, about 10 foot high. They'd actually have to have a ladder to get up onto the top to see where they were going. Take it down to London, and then unload it for the horses in London, and then they'd come back with the manure to spread on the field. Pick up another stack and off they'd go again. So, they were very, very versatile craft. In their heyday, there was about 2,000 of them registered. You pretty much wouldn't have been able to go anywhere around the East Coast without seeing a Thames barge, and you'd have seen them as far afield as down in Cornwall, over on the continent.
Kitty was even used to take munitions to France during World War I, but her days were numbered.
By the end of the 40s, early 50s, the biggest problem was actually finding crew. So unfortunately, it fizzled out, as it were.
The Thames barges had fallen out of fashion, but luckily there were still some seafarers who weren't prepared to let these beautiful old boats sink without trace.
These vessels are all part of the heritage of the country. They are unique. No other country has anything like these. I think it's absolutely vital that we still keep them for the generations to come. It's a continuity with our past, which would be awful sad to see it go. If there ever was to come a day when you couldn't look out and see a barge, well, I wouldn't want to be around for it, I know that.
These barges are truly part of the landscape here in Essex, perfectly adapted for use in their environment, and in every corner of the county you can see how people have learned to work in harmony with the climate and the natural world around them. If you drive 50 miles south of here towards London, you'll find another magnificent Essex garden, Hyde Hall, sitting on top of a hill amongst undulating countryside. This is a garden that shows exactly what can be done in one of the driest areas of the country. This was once a busy working farm exposed to the elements on all sides. But it's now been transformed into one of the finest gardens in the east of England. Hyde Hall is a mix of historic and contemporary horticulture. They planted traditional woodlands, meadows and hedgerows that will eventually blend into the landscape, as well as creating a dry and new world garden. In 1955, when Dick and Helen Robinson bought this farm, they inherited a few trees, an overgrown field of ryegrass and a derelict orchard as a starting point for their garden. But they cleared the land and started again. The garden curator, Ian LaGrosse, and I go back a long way. He was once a student of mine. Now that's nice to see you doing a bit of work.
Oh, nice for a change. Good to see you. I'm very well. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm fine, yeah.
Good.
So, what are you up to here?
We just decided this stops a bit abruptly, so
Right.
we're getting another piece of stone in just to finish the seam off and tuck it into the hill a bit tighter.
Are you going to bung some plants in?
We've got a few little things, but we'll filter those in around later.
Okay, well, can I give you a hand?
It'd be great to have at hand, certainly.
great, yeah.
Absolutely. So I think, we've got to just measure, dig,
Yeah.
and then maybe put some hardcore on the bottom. We
Yeah.
don't want the rock to sink.
Now, Ian, the last time I did in dealings with you, you was one of my students.
Yeah, I've got sort of fond memories of it. I remember as we were sort of dozing off, drifting off slightly, you used to sort of shout and get us all awake again. So those moments still haunt me.
Pleasantly.
Pleasantly, absolutely, yeah.
He must have been paying attention in some of my lectures, because just look at the glorious gardens Ian and his team has created. So what's your actual role here?
My role here is the head of site and curator, so I'm in charge of the whole site, all the activities that go on it.
It's not bad for an old student, is it?
No, not bad at all, actually. Not bad. I mean, it's a great place to work. Great team here, great atmosphere of the place.
If I do say so myself, he's done a grand job. What I like is seeing your name in the press. In the
Every now and then.
magazines. I think one of my old students.
Yes.
Great sense of pride.
Oh, no, that's good to hear. That is good to hear.
Ian and the team has seen lots of changes in the 22 years he's been at Hyde Hall, because this site was almost as hostile as the one Beth Chatto faced when she started planting. But unlike Beth's garden, the soil here was a solid, heavy clay, giving them all sorts of different challenges.
And we always sort of say that we put more money under the ground here at Hyde Hall than we do on the top.
Of course you do. That's what every gardener does.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to do it properly. It's a big piece of rock, Ian.
It is a sizable piece. I managed to move it a little bit myself, so I think between two of us, and with a bit of luck on our side.
Yeah. Get out your way. They've managed to create this dry garden by mixing in sharp sand and grit to the clay soil to take the water away. Perfect for drought-resistant plants of all kinds. And one firm favourite since it came here from the Mediterranean is lavender. There are more than 30 species of this lovely plant, which thrives in full sun and is happiest in well-drained soil. Colours range from blue to lilac and violet, and its heady scent is unmistakable. Lavender is good for encouraging sleep and relaxation. Not much chance of relaxation here. We've got this rock to get in. Well, let's have a look at the handiwork. That looks...
Almost looks like we haven't been there, but there's a new rock in place. Really tucks it into ground like we wanted to at the start.
Yeah. Is this your favourite bit of the garden?
It's a very nice bit, but no, I definitely prefer some of the hilltop garden.
OK, do you want to show me?
Why not? Why not? Totally different theme, but beautiful nonetheless.
Yeah, go on then. Let's go and have a shifty.
OK.
Hyde Hall is now owned by the Royal Horticultural Society and attracts thousands of visitors a year who come to enjoy the variety of gardening styles on show. From the contemporary look of the dry garden to Ian's favourite, the 6 formal beds filled with masses of gloriously scented blooms in the rose garden. So Ian, this is your favourite bit of the garden, but why?
I think it's my favourite bit because the rest of the plantings at Hyde Hall all sort of meander and sort of roll together and a lot more organic. This is a lot more formal, therefore it's different.
Right.
And it sort of rekindles people's love of roses, hopefully. Lovely old English flower shape, scent, very important for roses, I think. But with disease and pest resistance in the modern breeding. No longer do we have to don suits quite so often, come out and spray them.
Right, and what about the future? How are you taking it forward? What are your plans?
Well, the plans are to develop the perennial meadows and the hay meadows that we're working on. Huge drifts of bulbs naturalised in turf and the landscape pockmarked with trees. And then outside of that, you've got the true East Anglian, the countryside, the wild wood that we've been planting for 15 years.
You see, for me, that's what's typical of Hyde Hall. You're constantly moving it on, but you're always showing what you can do on a really windy, dry site, and I think that's fantastic. Time never stands still in a garden. They've worked so hard to create something beautiful here that's so in tune with its surroundings. But just a few miles away is a natural spectacle that's largely untouched by time. This must be one of the most stunning prehistoric sites I've seen in the British countryside. These salt marshes have looked like this for thousands of years. You wouldn't think anything could grow down there, but believe it or not, they support a fascinating and unique habitat for plant life. Neil Harvey works for the Essex Wildlife Trust.
The salt marshes have been here since after the last ice age, and they're created when rivers are bringing the silt down to the coast, widen out, and they lose their energy and they can't carry that material anymore, so they drop the silts.
What's left behind is very high in nutrients, and this builds up to a height where the plants can start to grow.
The vegetation on salt marshes is quite specialised. There aren't a huge number of species of plants here. It's quite a simple community, but all of the plants are particularly adapted to growing in these conditions, so they have to cope with various kind of stresses.
The salt marshes are covered by the tide twice a day, but the plants have to be salt tolerant to survive in this habitat.
Plants like samphire, which are succulent, a bit like cacti, so they're holding on to water in that way. Other plants like the sea lavender will have a really thick cuticle, which means they can hold on to the water. So there are lots of different adaptations that they show that allow them to live here where most plants wouldn't be able to survive.
As well as plants, the salt marshes are a rich food source. The Blackwater estuary has been fished for oysters for 1,000 years, and oysters are still harvested by hand here today. And lamb grazed on salt marshes is deliciously juicy and tender with a fantastic flavour. Perhaps it was this that led ancient settlers to find a way to harvest the most precious treasure of all from this apparently empty landscape: salt. The ancient town of Maldon, which sits at the head of the Blackwater estuary, has been at the centre of the salt-making industry for 2,000 years. Clive Osborne's family has been involved for 4 generations.
Everything all right this morning? Yeah, everything fine. Sea salt has been produced in this area going back to the Roman times and then through the Saxon and Norman times. Going back to the Great Domesday Book, there were no fewer than 45 salt pans listed on this particular part of the river.
This area has always been perfect for producing salt, not only because it's the driest part of the country, but because of the way the salt marshes help concentrate and filter the seawater.
Salt produced in this area has been known as Maldon salt for a long time, but in 1882 a company was formed called the Maldon Crystal Salt Company.
And the process hasn't changed much over the centuries. Seawater is brought in from the estuary and filtered into massive pans. It's boiled to remove impurities and then heated until the salt crystallises. Workers use a traditional method of drawing the crystals by hand from the pans. Sometimes the older, simpler ways of doing things really can't be improved upon. And it's not only on the coast that you can find rich pickings from the environment. Head inland from Maldon and you can reach a community that's determined to make the most of whatever it can produce itself. Wivenhoe is one of more than 1,000 so-called transition towns across the world. They want to practice sustainability and save our dwindling oil supplies by encouraging us all to go local. Ruth Melville explains.
We've been going since maybe 2008, 2009, and as part of the project we've started doing quite a few food-related things, because I suppose one of the core things about transition is moving from sort of not thinking about where it comes from to realising that you can get a lot of things locally, and obviously it's fresher and it's easier to get hold of.
The group has converted bits of unused land in the town to produce food, including the disused station master's garden next to the local railway line, which has become a herb and vegetable plot, and they love nothing better than to share their bounty.
One year we had far too many courgettes, which grew into marrows, so we made marrow curry and gave it out to the commuters as they were coming off the train.
Lucky commuters. Businesses have also joined the transition campaign. One pub landlord offered his backyard so that neighbours could set up a community chicken coop. Carol Rennie and her son Joshua love getting involved.
I'm one of about 8 of us and we take shifts, so every other Friday it's mine and Josh's turn to do the chickens. So we come in the morning, let the chickens out of their coop, and then we come and collect the eggs, clean out the bottom and give them any scraps that we've got.
We're not allowed to feed them onions, I think, but like other things we usually do.
The kids are having fun, getting their hands dirty at the same time as learning where their food comes from.
And what have you learned, Joshua?
Not much, actually.
Well, you can't win them all. The volunteers are so dedicated and productive that the local council even asked them to take over a vacant plot of land and do something with it. The result is this fabulous wildlife garden, which is John Rowland's domain.
Before we started creating this garden, it was pretty much just scrubland, and then once we'd cleared all that, we could start putting in plants that are good for the bees and the butterflies. The big thing was making sure that we had a pond, so we got some water. We've done lots of activities with pond dipping, just getting people out here. All sorts of events that we've run out over the year to sort of get the most out of what is quite a nice little wildlife garden.
Today, the neighbours are all getting together for a meal in the open air, using ingredients from the garden, including the eggs that the children have collected earlier, as well as herbs from the station master's garden. Scrumptious.
Quite a lot of butter in that. The idea of moving to a more sustainable society is one that I agree with, and I've met lots of nice, like-minded people doing it.
These neighbours may be amateur gardeners, but they've used their environment to produce a wonderful harvest. What an achievement.
How is it?
Lovely!
Do you like it?
Oh, so salty!
In Essex, it's fantastic to see the ingenious ways in which people and plants have adapted to this dry, windy, low-lying landscape and created something that not only produces food and sustains life, but is also beautiful. And the one place that sums it all up for me is Beth Chatto's garden. She and Andrew did so much to show gardeners how to work with their surroundings. I love it here, and I want to give my own offering to this beautiful place. After garden director David and I had a close encounter with all those lovely bugs earlier, it occurred to me there's one thing that would benefit Beth's garden and the local environment for years into the future. And it involves a practice that stretches back 4,000 years, perfect for traditional Essex, beekeeping. As pretty much any school child knows, plants need to be pollinated to reproduce and spread. Bats, birds and insects all do this job, but by far the most important of the pollinators are bees. For Essex beekeeper Lee Bartrip, it was an accident of nature that led to a new passion.
Initially, as a swarm came into the garden, and I didn't know what to do with them, so I went online to check what you do with a swarm in your garden, joined the local bee association, and really just found it so fascinating. I thought, yeah, I'm going to become a beekeeper.
Lee installed a beehive in his garden and has a colony of 15,000 bees. He inspects the hives regularly to check on the health of the bees and to see how they're getting on with honey production.
If it's been a good year, you get honey, get wax for candle making. It's just really good fun looking after bees.
No wonder bees got the reputation for being busy. A worker bee visits about 100 flowers collecting nectar on every foraging trip. They store the nectar in their honey stomachs where it mixes with enzymes. When they're full, they head back to their hive.
We have sealed honey here. The bees are still bringing in nectar, which comes straight from the plant. It's being passed from the foraging bee to the houseworking bees, and these are all houseworking bees, so they're not old enough to go out to collect nectar yet themselves.
It's the job of these young bees to process and store this sugary substance in the comb cells within the hive. Bees top up the cells until they're full, then allow water to evaporate off until the substance has thickened.
And that's a complete frame of honey. It's being capped, so that is actually ready to harvest.
It's incredible to think that to produce 1 pound of honey, around 500 bees will have visited about 2 million flowers, and that one bee will only produce a fraction of a teaspoonful in its lifetime. But what a treat for us. Gardens provide the habitat bees need to thrive, and all the gardens I've visited today are a natural bee paradise. Particularly this one, where Beth Chatto and her husband Andrew have been so determined to work in harmony with the natural world around them. Beth doesn't make TV appearances these days, so I'm thrilled that this towering figure in the world of horticulture has kindly agreed to have a chat with me today. Beth, how lovely to see you.
Oh, I'm so pleased to see you.
This is a real privilege.
Oh, not at all. That's for me too.
For me, this garden has always exuded two people, Andrew and you.
Indeed, and Andrew, of course. Without him, it wouldn't be like this.
And it was that ability of Andrew to really see plants in nature, bring them back, and then pass that knowledge to you, the plantsman, the artist, the person with soul.
Well, I think we were a good partnership. We were so different, for one thing. I mean, Andrew was not a practical gardener in the sense that we perhaps understand it. He was an intellectual.
Right.
I was a teenager when I first met him, and I was interested in gardening because my parents were both keen gardeners. But here was Andrew bringing in to me, a totally new conception of gardening. Not to be using hybrid plants made which lost all their character. He taught me to look carefully and see the beauty in plants as they are growing in the wild now. Majority of people will think, well, they're just fiddly, you know, but think of many of the plants that are growing here that are as they grow in the wild. Although it is a very complicated garden now, I know in many ways, I've aimed for simplicity through the principle of putting plants where they're comfortable and happy, because plants are like people. They don't want to be pushed into the nearest available hole. And the Japanese golden rule, the earth, heaven, man, line. Well,
Triangles.
Triangles, yes.
Yeah, well, you pulled it off with so much panache, it's untrue. And what you're leaving us, Beth, is something very, very special. So thank you so much.
I'm overwhelmed.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you so much.
What a remarkable woman. Beth's inspired so many people, including me. There's nothing I can give her that could possibly reflect her lifetime of achievements, but there's one thing that would benefit the garden that I'm sure she'll approve of. Today I've seen how, through the centuries, people in Essex have learned to work with their environment without changing it, and how they continue to use traditional, simple ways to harvest what they need from nature. And to round off this very special day, I've gathered everyone together for a little celebration.
Now, this is a happy sight. Look at all this. Honey cake. That's beautiful, isn't it?
Very nice. Do you want some?
Wow, I'd love some. Yeah, terrific. Yeah. Look at the beautiful flower. Oh, I'm going to have a chomp. I've had a really beautiful day today. An iconic garden, a very iconic lady, sharing a passion, sharing a love. We need to ensure that love, that knowledge, that enthusiasm for nature and gardens continues. And we've got little seedlings from the same family, a bigger seedling, the matriarch. And we just thought it would be really nice to actually ensure that bees continue to come into this garden so the future is secure. And we thought it'd be quite nice to leave you with your very own beehive.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
That's an old-fashioned beehive.
Absolutely. We couldn't give you a modern one. I think that's lovely, isn't it?
It's very attractive, yes.
Desiree,
Yeah. So, I can come back and always have honey cake.
Britain has some of the finest gardens anywhere in the world. For me, it's about getting in amongst the wonderful plants that flourish in this country and sharing the passion of the people who tend them.
However, there is another way to enjoy a garden. And that's to get up above it.
I love ballooning because you get to see the world below in a whole new light.
From up here, you get a real sense of how the garden sits in the landscape, how the terrain and the climate has shaped it. And I want you to share that experience with me.
I'm taking to the skies over a county on the southeastern edge of the country, and what a surprise it is. I'll show you a wonderful open rural landscape bisected by waterways and bounded by 350 miles of coastline, with the Thames providing a direct link into the heart of London. Today I'm visiting Essex. In the north of the county you've got the beautiful Epping Forest, in the far south the Thames Estuary, and on the east mile upon mile of marshland and mudflats. What a view! I want to show you how different this county is from the suburban outpost of London we sometimes imagine. It's the maritime geography of Essex that creates a temperate climate. It's one of the driest counties in the country, and that makes for some fascinating gardens. Today I'll be seeing how two beautiful gardens